So the next topic I want to talk about is problems and misconceptions with these practices with Agile, Scrum, and XP before we move specifically into how do we test in this new paradigm. So the first problem that we often run into is just the need for speed, is just how compressed these cycles are and how fast they are. If you even adopt a couple of these practices, the throughput, the amount of code that your developers are going to be churning out is going to increase. So even if you implement just a couple of these practices, the first one that people usually implement is stopping writing giant requirements documents and write these much smaller user stories. The speed with which your developers are going to be writing code and getting code to you to test is going to increase. So you have to have some infrastructure to support testing faster. So the first thing I want to say is, if you are not automating significantly, not just a little bit, not just an automated smoke test, if you don't have big, full, blown-out regression suites, you may fail at Agile just because you're not going to be able to keep up. So the need to heavily automate is really essential in the Agile world. Next, if you're not unit testing, if you're not you as a tester, but if your developers aren't unit testing, if your team is not doing unit testing, the quality of code that's delivered to you is just not going to be high enough for you to be able to turn around code and get it fixed and to production quality that fast. So unit testing really has to be implemented, whether you're fully doing TDD, test-driven development, or test first. That's great, even better. But if you're not unit testing, these short sprints are just not going to be successful for your teams. If you don't have an automated build process, we talked in the last section about an automated build process, that's just essential. And also, if you don't have very regular contact with your customer. So all of these ideas, the Agile, Scrum, XP ideas that we've been talking about, these frameworks are really reliant on having a very close connection with either your marketing team, business analysts, or directly to the users themselves, that you have daily direct contact with these people, that we're all sitting in a war room, we're all sitting in a bullpen together, and I can just turn around and ask a business analyst a question and get an answer and continue in my testing. Or I have the product owner there that I can say, well, what's a user supposed to do when they do this? And they can answer the question rather than me sending an email out into the ethos and wondering when I'm going to get an answer. With this need for speed, you have to have immediate and regular contact with the customer or the customer representative. There is a huge human component that we're not talking about in just these short videos that is really essential to success in the Agile world. For example, when I go do consulting work on Agile, or I'm helping a team become more Agile, I'm constantly saying over and over, people and interactions are more important than processes and tools. The first line in the Agile Manifesto, people are more important than processes and tools. People and interactions. People, meaning working at a sustainable pace, cutting down or eliminating overtime. People and interaction, how people talk to each other, how people respect each other, how people talk to each other, that we sit together, that we can interact daily and we can interact easily, no one's condescended to. That people and interactions are more important than processes, tools, the test case manager, any ALM, application lifecycle management tool, any process that we have built. People and interactions are more important than a tool. You can't get more basic than that in Agile. So that's just one idea. The human component of team dynamics and communication and respect, all of this is crucial to being successful at Agile. And I would love to do a couple of sessions only on these human components. But that's not what the focus of this is. This is really on testing. But I will tell you that if your team isn't happier in these new Agile development practices, something is wrong. If the team isn't working less overtime, now that you become more Agile, there's something wrong. There's probably something immediately wrong in the estimation process. So teams need to be happier. And that's really what Agile is about. So I would go do some reading on these people aspects, the team aspects. It's the absolute foundation of Agile, is that people have to work at a more sustainable pace and be happier at their work. The biggest problem I see when companies try and implement Agile is where a chicken, if I was going to talk about chickens and pigs, I hope you understand what chickens and pigs are. If you don't understand what chickens and pigs are, go read about Scrum and XP more and come back and do this session again. A manager, a chicken, coming in and saying, this is what you have to deliver, this is when you have to deliver it, here's how you're going to work, this is what you're going to do, and this is the functionality that's going to be included, and you're going to deliver to me on this day. That's not how Agile works. The idea that you're going to have these people in charge, these managers, come in and say, managers, directors, come in and say, this is what you're Agile now, so be faster. Agile means faster, so you guys have to be faster. This is the functionality you're going to produce, and you're going to give it to me in 2 weeks. That's not Agile. You may call that person may call that Agile, but that's not what Agile's about. We haven't talked about being faster here as what a foundation topic in Scrum is. Delivering customer value sooner is a foundation of Scrum, but not just developing code faster. So another common thing that I've seen as an implementation of Agile is where a manager or a director will say, okay, so stop writing these giant requirements documents and get code out faster. If you're not implementing these other practices, implementing some of these this infrastructure that I've been talking about to be faster, just stopping writing requirements documents will point out other problems in your development process. Just being faster and stopping writing requirements documents is not Agile. That's not what Agile is about. So the misconceptions and problems about what Agile actually is are probably more common than successful implementations of Agile. So Jeff Sutherland talks very specifically about what it means implementing some of these practices, but not many or not all. So the idea where somebody could say, well, we're Agile, but we're not automating. Or we're using Scrum, but managers still drive what I have to deliver every 2 weeks. Or we're Agile, but I still have to put in a lot of overtime. Or we're Agile, but I'm multitasking. I'm still working on 3 or 4 projects. When I said there was a big human component to this, no more multitasking. Multitasking is a failed idea that we'll talk about that in another session. But the idea that we're Agile, but I'm still multitasking, working on 3 separate projects. That's not Agile. That's not Scrum. To say, we're Agile, but we don't automate. Jeff Sutherland calls that being a Scrum butt. You're a Scrum butt. Well, we're Scrum, but we're not this. We're Scrum, but we're not that. And Scrum butts doesn't mean that you just won't be successful. It means that you won't be as successful as the way that Scrum is really designed to be successful, or Agile is really designed to be successful. So being a Scrum butt and implementing 1 or 2 practices will just point out how the maturity level of the development practice you have now. It's not going to mean that you're successful in Agile by implementing 2 or 3 practices. So to really get the full benefit from this move toward being Agile, you really have to build that infrastructure, implement a significant number of these practices. What I would suggest is that you go take a look at what's called the Nokia Test. It's referred to a lot. Nokia developed a set of questions to first have you discern, are we iterative or not? In that very first breakaway from a waterfall type SDLC, are we iterative? And after the first couple of questions about are we iterative or not, the next couple of questions are about are we Scrum? Do we really do Scrum? And for example, one of the questions is, at the end of a sprint, do you have working software? Can you demonstrate working software? And I bet that, I want to use a conservative number, at least a third of the organizations I go to, if not half. Let's just say a third of the organizations, but a surprisingly large number of organizations. At the end of a sprint, the team cannot demonstrate that functionality. And really, by definition, that's not Scrum. If you can't demonstrate the functionality, if we say, well, we're done, but I can't show you, then that's not really delivering customer value functionality. So go take a look at this Nokia test to see if your team is already saying it's Agile or we're doing Scrum, are you really? Are you a Scrum butt or are you really Agile? So reference that Nokia test. So some of the key concepts I want to finish up here. The main topics that we've talked about in these couple of discussions so far is unit testing and this user story acceptance testing are great. They're really good, especially when they're automated and can be run. But it's not a replacement for what test engineers, for what traditional testers do. Unit testing and this user story acceptance is different than the role of traditional testers. We also have to work very closely with the whole product team, sitting in the same room, sitting in a bullpen, daily contact, having discussion, conversation around user stories, access to the product owner is really essential to being able to do really significant discovery on how the software product works and write our test cases needs immediate conversation. If we've taken that period, that phase, those couple of phases, a requirements phase and a design phase, where people were discussing what's the product going to do and how do we test it and what is it going to look like and seeing mock-ups and all these kinds of things that we used to do, if those are out the window, we have to be in pretty close proximity and have very good communication with the other people on the team to do our test job effectively. If we used to sit on the 4th floor and our developers were on the 2nd floor and our BAs were in another building, that's not going to work. You can't be Agile and not have the team together. So another key concept here is that test engineers really have to communicate to the whole development organization, to the whole team, to my whole Scrum team, what is it that testers do? What are the limitations of unit testing? What is user story acceptance testing about? What does that tell you? That validation. What does it mean to validate rather than to test? What is functional testing? What is smoke testing? What does regression testing tell you? Many people on your team may not have a great exposure to the details of what testing is about. And on these sprint teams, you should be cross-functional. You may get people on your team who've never been intimately involved with testing before. It's your job to educate them. If the teams are self-forming and we can decide what kind of processes we need, how long we're going to spend doing things, it is your job to communicate this information of what testing is about to that team. And also the team has to understand that testing as we have known it is not specified in Agile, it's not specified in Scrum, it's not specified in XP. In XP, which talks about testing the most, when you talk about testing, it's unit testing and user story acceptance validation, not the traditional type of testing that we did. So, test engineers are crucial to any successful Agile project. There is significant information about software stability that can be provided by testers, but things are absolutely different now. Our job, what it looks like, what we do on a day-to-day basis is different now. That's what we're going to be talking about in the last couple of segments, is a specific testing practice that we're going to develop to meet these demands of being Agile. So, see you in the next segment. Thanks.